Well, hey, friends, and good morning. Welcome back to another daily devotional. My name is Justin, pastor of Cold Creek Church. We do this daily devotional every morning throughout the week to get into the Word of God and just see what we can find there and to be challenged and changed by what we discover in His Word. I guarantee you, nothing is more deeply satisfying than coming to the wellspring of His Word. Now, today we're going to actually pause on our run through the verse by verse of Jude because today is a very special day in history, and we call this day Good Friday. Um, the fact of the matter is, it's actually not a Good Friday when you think about the events that took place on Good Friday 2,000 years ago. Um, but they were world changing, history changing, and for those of us that follow Jesus, they have become life changing. And so I want to take just a few minutes today to look at a narrative of what actually happened on Good Friday. Although we really look forward to Easter, and Easter is really exciting. We got Sunday coming up, and we know that's maybe you don't know, but we celebrate Easter because that was the day that Jesus rose from the dead and conquered death, celebrating victory over the grave. Only one person in history has claimed to do that, and it was this man named Jesus, who also said he was God. But before he gets to the resurrection, he has to die. And his death was ugly. His death was nasty. His death showed us how ugly and nasty we are. And you think, well, don't call me ugly and nasty. Well, it actually is a picture of the human heart. It's a picture of our human condition. It's a picture that you and I would be willing, most likely, if we were there in first century Rome, we would be somewhere on the scene. Everyone wants to think of themselves as the good guy next to Jesus, going, "Hey, Jesus, you're the man. Go!" Like, no, that's probably not you, and probably not me. And so this shows us the real tendency of the human heart to kill and destroy the light of God. And so we'll take a look at that. We'll go through a narrative of we'll kind of pick up on what Good Friday was going to be, because Jesus knew all along that this was going to happen in his 33 years of life, which was very short lived. He knew early on in his ministry that this was going to happen. So here's what he says in Mark 9:31. This is far before Good Friday. Uh, he was teaching his disciples and saying to them, "The Son of Man," that's a self reference, "is going to be delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And when he is killed, after 3 days, he will rise." Okay, so he's giving a vision. This is what I'm walking into. This is my destiny. I'm announcing this ahead of time. Now, even when he said this, his disciples in the room at that time didn't even fully understand it. They couldn't comprehend it yet. But sure enough, it was going to come true. Now, fast forward to the day that this stuff does happen. Okay. Time goes by, maybe years go by, and it's finally the time when the government and the religious come together to put Jesus, the God man, to death. It says, then Pilate, verse 19, then Pilate, and Pilate is the Roman government. Okay, so this is the government. Think about America. America has a government. America issues capital punishment. Okay, we're not inescapable from this story. Find yourself somewhere in the story. Then Pilate, the government, had Jesus flogged, and with a lead-tipped whip. Flogged, that means beaten with a whip. These were lead tip. In case the whip beating wasn't severe enough, we're going to tip the whip with lead and then beat you. Okay, that's awful. Now, the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head. A crown of thorns and put it on his head. and they put a purple robe around him. They mocked him and they slapped him on the face. Now, let me just remind you, this is an innocent man. This is an innocent man who has healed people, who has welcomed children into his community, who has welcomed women, who has loved lost and broken people, who has loved sick people, who has loved the outcasts in society, who has gathered lepers who were shamed by everyone else and brought them into his fold and touched them and hugged them and made them feel welcome. This is a person who even sat with the hyper religious who were going to judge him. He even went to the table with them knowing that they were going to try and find a way to accuse him of something, but he still spent time with them. This is someone who was even kind to the Roman authorities. He said to honor the Roman authorities, honor the government. This person was completely innocent. Completely innocent. And I know it's crazy to think that we all have familiar stories. We've heard things in the news. We know of situations that have happened where there's been a police brutality attack, someone dies, or there's an awful situation where a man who shouldn't have died gets caught up right in some hustle with the cops, and the cops brutally murder this person, and that's an awful situation. That is terrible. But this situation here is different than that. This situation is a purely innocent man who had never committed any crime ever, but they had found him so guilty in their own minds that they would beat him with a whip, put thorns on his head, mock him, and then slap him in the face. And then it says, when they saw him, the leading priests and temple guards began shouting, "Crucify him, crucify him." So not only is the government involved in the death of the God-man, but now the religious figures, the leading religious figures, begin shouting, "Yep, we're with you. We're with you. This guy's got to go. This guy is causing problems. He's breaking socio-cultural boundaries. He's helping all the people that we don't like to be helped. He's mixing in with all these different crowds. He's too much. We can't handle him. We don't know what to do with him. We can't put him in a category. We can't put him in a box. We can't label him. He's too rugged. He's too loving at the same time. He's too tough towards us. He's too tender towards people. So we don't kill him. Kill the man. We agree. Yeah, just, you know what? Kill the man. So you have both highbrows in society going, let's kill him. These are two parties that usually do not get along. Like Romans and Jews, not usually friends, but when it comes to killing God, let's get on the same team. This is the human heart. This is what we do. This is how we are. This is not a story about that we're not in. We're in there somewhere. And so they took Jesus away, carrying the cross by himself. He went to the place called the place of the skull. In Hebrew, this is Golgotha. You may have heard that word before. And there they nailed him to the cross. We're not talking about death by an electric chair. We're not talking about death by injection of poison or cyanide. We're talking about nailing a human being to a cross through the wrists and through the ankles, through the feet, and letting them sit there until they suffer from dehydration and pain for long enough that they die on their own, in shame, naked, in public, on a public cross, to be laughed at and mocked by all the Romans and all the religious and all the government and all the haters and all the accusers and all the social media and all the news outlets, to come out there and broadcast him live, dying publicly in shame. This is an innocent man. Broken. You may ask why. Why would a situation like this happen? Why would the why would we do that as human beings? Why would we do this to God himself? Or why would God allow this to happen to himself? Why would God allow himself to endure this treatment from his own creation, from his own people? Right? God makes the world, comes into the world, suffers at the hands of the world that he made, and endures it. Why? Isaiah 53:5. This was a prophecy about who Christ would be, who God would reveal himself to be, how he would save the world. This was actually written 700 years prior to the life of Jesus. And it says, but he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that brought us peace. And with his wounds, we are healed. The intention of the cross and the pain that Christ bore was so that we, you and I, could be healed through his wounds. He would endure pain so that we would endure the peace. He would be crushed so that we would be lifted. The greatest love you can ever know in life is someone who would die for you. There's no great way to show love than for someone who would say, I will willingly give my life for you. This is what God is saying in Jesus. I am going to show you my love for you. I'm going to prove my love for you by dying for you, sacrificing myself in the most gruesome way possible in history. Many historians have said that the Roman crucifixion of the first century was the most gruesome version of capital punishment that has ever existed in human history. And this is the one that God submits himself to on our behalf, so that we, through his life and death, may find healing. There is no greater love than someone who would die for you. Then there is no greater love than God himself, who would come to the world and suffer to show his love for you. This is amazing grace. And yet, this is the sin, the level of sin that it exposes in our life. This is how bad sin is. This is how far removed we are as human people from God. We are so far from him that he had to die for us. This is the extent that it took. This is not some easy peasy pie in the sky. Yeah, just believe, just have faith. God loves you. God's cool with you. God's whatever. God's this thing. I think God's this thing. I think I'm enlightened by, well, if it was that easy, he wouldn't have had to die like this. This would have been a waste of time. This is how bad off we are. This depicts how much we need God, and yet we are blind to it. We're so blind that you and me today would probably be somewhere among the Romans or the religious, the government or the religious, the political or the standby watching the news. We're just on the news, watching the news. Wow, that sounds terrible. That's an awful story. I'm just sitting here and eat my potato chips. We'd be somewhere in the story, probably not on the cross with Jesus. Because that's how bad off we are. That's how much we need him. We're so blind. We can't see it. Maybe this story today, Good Friday, the weight of it, the crushing weight of the reality that he bore for us would awaken our eyes more to who he is. So today says Good Friday, but it's really a weighty Friday. It's a dark Friday, because an innocent man was sentenced to death. But we know from God's perspective that it was actually God sentencing himself to death on our behalf. Stay encouraged this weekend, because good things are coming on Sunday. Resurrection Sunday is coming up. Love you all. Be loved and love well this weekend, knowing we have ultimate hope beyond the grave, ultimate hope beyond this dark and depressing day, because Jesus will come again. We love you.